the tone was kind of set by our parents, who are both, they aren't in the field, but they are just, they love music and a variety of music. And because of that, we end up listening to a lot of different kinds of genres and a lot of different songs, different artists, uh, different languages also, for that matter. And I think the biggest catalyst in that sense was when our mom gifted Sarthak a guitar on his 11th birthday, I think. And that kind of made us realize that, oh, we have this um, sensibility of music within us, and we can pursue this further in some way. So I think that's what started it off. And then when my father got me the drum kit, because he's a big fan of like percussion and rhythm and things like that. So he found out I want to play the drums. He was really, really excited. He's like, "We're gonna make this happen." So the drums came and the guitar was there, and then we just started jamming and figuring things out, and that's really how it all started for
One
us.
of the lesser known facts, which I think have really shaped us, and I think we've realized, at least I realized it a lot later. So our parents are actually huge fans of, he said different things, but mainly like RD and SD Burman, OP Nair, all of that old Hindi music. And my mom is a huge fan of ghazals. But one of the things that my mom did very distinctly was that she would actually sing to us every night, especially when we were in school, really young, etc. And it became this sort of habit where we were always just surrounded by music, especially before going to bed. And that left this indelible sense of like melody in my head, and very simple, old, sweet melodies, of like all these songs that we were listening to. And of course, we spent a lot of weekends listening to music, all four of us together, especially RD and SD Burman. And my dad is someone who can actually name a song by just listening to the first 3 seconds of an intro of a song. And my mom knows all the Mehdi Hasan ghazals and Begum Akhtar and so on and so forth. So that big part of like Indian history of music was with us. And then when we started going to school, obviously we were exposed to like world music and all sorts of bands and artists. So that really helped us get in sync and start jamming together with the instruments that he said they bought. So that was huge.
I remember there was a time when we went on tour, and they didn't like come with us, but they would like land at that place for just the show and then head home again the next day and things like that. So they've always been extremely supportive, and a lot of this is because they could kind of help us do this. Because I think that for a creative person, it's one thing to encourage them, but at a very basic level, the first thing you shouldn't do is get in the way. And that's the one thing where they like gave us the instruments, gave us the resources to say that, okay, fine, this is now with you guys, you make of it what you can, right? So I think that even that space to just leave a person in this field by themselves to like figure things out, understand what they want, how they perceive what can be done, right, what their ambition is with regards to this. And I think that that first step itself was such a big deal, because they left us alone. And then we kind of just ended up, we're like, okay, we have the same inspiration, we understand each other. There's so many times we communicate without even looking. We're just like, we look at that person, or we only have to say anything, and then you just know what the other's thinking. So that, matching the wavelength, that happened because it was just the both of us figuring it out. So I think that was very, very useful to just let us be.
I knew he was going to say exactly all those things. He was so much in sync, man. It's crazy. Gotta lip sync that.
Yeah.
I think for me with the guitar, I started out listening to Green Day, which is still till date my favorite band, and I remember American Idiot was possibly the album for me that made me want to become a musician or pick up the guitar and then see it through. Every time I pick up a song, it's especially with the guitar, I find that a lot of people it's really enticing in the beginning and it's exciting to have the guitar in your hand and play and like whatever with your friends or in school. All of that is cool, but then when you start playing song after song, it's very easy to feel like, oh, my fingers are hurting, let me just drop it. And that happens to a lot of people. A lot of it is just patience. But for me, more than the patience, it was that I loved what I was listening to. And I wanted to be able to just play that. It just spoke to me at a very sort of deep, visceral level. So, I mean, there was Green Day, there was Incubus, there was Black Keys, there was obviously all the classic rock stuff, all the 80s and the 90s stuff that everyone knows. Um, but again, it was just enduring like that sense of melody, and over time it just became like a really fun exercise. Also back then, I mean, we're not that old, but obviously social media is a humongous thing now, and in our lives you can tell how much of a distraction it can be. You know, you're just constantly escaping into the phone. If you have like a minute to spare, you're traveling somewhere, you're putting your phone out, etc., etc. For me at that point in time, it's sitting at home, other than my studies, it was just the guitar, you know, or going down to play with friends and stuff. So it was literally one big bucket of my life. So it's just something that came very, very naturally to me once I fell in love with the instrument and I just saw it through. It's not that it was like a small love affair that burned too bright, you know. I just picked up the guitar, tried 2 songs, oh, my fingers hurt, let me quit. So it just became like this challenge and this exercise. And like I said, because it was a huge part of my life, in the way kind of like phones are now for a lot of people, right? But for me, it was not the phone, it was just the guitar. So that was fun. And I feel like it still is. I feel extremely grounded now as well when I pick up the guitar and I want to learn a song or go back to the songs that, you know, some days you feel a little bit disillusioned, you're not able to crack the song that you're working on. I go back and I play the songs that give me a sense of purpose, really, to pick up the guitar and feel like, oh, this is why I did it, and these are the songs I loved, and this is what I'd like to do again.
So I think I was just having the same conversation yesterday, and
With
someone
whom, man?
asked me, with a student.
Damn, Shaq.
So someone asked, one of my students asked me that, you know, what is this life like? Because from the outside, we see that y'all are always like traveling and staying in these nice places and performing to crowds and stuff like that. And, you know, you're literally doing what you love doing as a profession. So it must be great. So I said that, you know, I feel that what happens is it's like it's almost like any relationship where in the beginning it's all the exciting stuff and you're just blown away. You're like, oh my god, I can't believe this is happening, and you're like uh, just always in awe, right? And over time, there are like, I'll admit that there are some days where this feels like a job, you know, and I think that's a good thing because the challenge then you face is how do you motivate yourself because you have no boss to tell you anything. And Sarthak and me didn't have any teacher growing up who was pushing us. I think what we had was each other, and just, you know, we were in a way always pushing each other to improve. And because I'd see him playing all of the songs that I also really like listening to, I'm like, wow, you know, I want to play that. How do we do that? And then when we started playing together, like, oh, this sounds fun. We should learn more songs together, you know. And then we'd introduce each other to the music we may have heard somewhere else, like, oh, you know, the song is a nice like guitar riff to it, or this has a cool drum part. And we're like, oh, let's try playing this together. So in that sense, that we didn't have any external influence and any external motivation, it was just each other. And then also yourself, where you say that, okay, fine, like, I can see that this person that I, you know, jam with regularly, he's doing really well. I'm maybe falling back a little bit, so I can push myself a little more. So in that sense, the thing that keeps us going is having someone in close proximity who's always pushing themselves, and then you feel like, okay, then I need to push myself too. So in that way, you know, it's also like growing up together and understanding what are our limits, how can we push ourselves, how can we push the other person. So that really helped, just having someone always in close proximity to kind of feed off. The one thing I always advise, even my students who I teach the drums, I always advise them that it's very easy to get tantalized and distracted by the frills that are around the idea of being a musician today. Like, you feel forced into prioritizing things other than music. So my only advice always is that no matter what you do, if you're not good at your main profession, you will be cast aside. Because in today's world, there's no time for people who aren't doing a good enough job. I think there's an elevated standard that comes with the the boom of now I can hear music from anywhere. I can make music from anywhere. So the competition is automatically a lot more. And if you get, you know, thrown off and distracted by, oh, uh, I need to look a certain way, I need to sound a certain way, I need to appear a certain way, you know, this is my brand. Of course, those things are important and something we also keep an eye out for, that we want to be viewed as a certain musician, but that cannot take away from being a good musician. Knowing your craft, understanding your sound, your identity as a musician. I feel like those things have to come first, and you'll see it yourself in as an audience member. If you are in a show where they have amazing dancers, amazing production, amazing lights, but they just don't sound good, that's all you'll remember, because finally it's like going to a restaurant and everything's great but the food. You'll be like, what's the point? There's only so many times you can lie to yourself, and there's only so many times you can buy a good review. But finally, what will happen is the word of mouth will spread and you will be cast aside. Yeah, first things first. Of course, it's important to, yeah, like you have to be a good musician first. And that the idea of good musician is subjective. So, whatever you think is a good musician and what suits your sound, but you have to be the best you can be on that front first. That has to be the priority.
My advice is like his. I think is I'm obviously pertinent, but it's very specific to being a musician. But I think what I would say is slightly more like perhaps big picture. Two pieces of advice. One is that try and be like a more complete person first, right? Because I feel like one of the things that's happening is that a lot of people are feeling increasingly scattered. There's just so much information, there's just so much happening. You're constantly comparing yourself. There's like social media is increasing everyone's anxiety, and you're constantly, on your toes about everything you do in your life, right? Like from fitness to mental health to relationships to food to how much you should sleep. I mean, everything is under scrutiny, right? And we're doing that to ourselves. So it's very difficult to prioritize in your life. So my first thing would be to tell anyone and myself that I tell every day is try and be just a more well-rounded, complete person, right? So obviously take care of your health in every sense, but also have the right kind of people around yourself. Cut off from the noise, so that you know exactly, literally as a musician as well, you got to cut off from the noise, and focus on the basics, because that's what's going to help you create. I think of music as just an offshoot, one big part, but a part nonetheless of who I am, right? Like I also do a whole bunch of other things and I have to play multiple roles in my life, and that's always going to be the case, right? Whether I have the guitar in my hand or not. So the first thing would be try and be just a more complete person. But the second thing when it comes to music or writing or creating anything, I'd say is that what I tell myself always is that fast is slow and slow is fast. So if you're trying to learn something super fast, right, like our perception of time is warped. Everyone wants to learn everything super quickly. But what happens then is you're setting up these obstacles for yourself, because all you want is speed. When I'm like playing the guitar, the first thing that comes to my mind is not to like rip the solo, that speed comes after I've practiced something slowly multiple times. And the paradox here is that when you do anything slowly, you learn fast. But when you try and learn fast, you just slow down, you know. So if you're trying to pick up the guitar, any instrument really, be patient with yourself. Like be slow with everything. Enjoy your food, enjoy your sleep, enjoy your walk, because we're now in that generation where we feel like the clock is ticking no matter what we do. Like everything, the clock is ticking. So yeah, slow down a little bit and see where it goes.
Can you speak about how you approach like writing melody?
I think again, I think this traces back to what I was telling you earlier about growing up with like retro Hindi songs, and I feel like retro music in general. Um, I was always drawn to simple melodies. So I'm never writing like very complicated vocal parts, or like, I like to harmonize and all of that, because I feel like that's just a production choice I make and it just makes it exciting. But the lead melody is usually for me, I'll have a chord progression that I sit down with and I'll sit with it for a very long time. I'll try different things that I'll hum out different options for melodies, I'll jot them down and record them, etc. But for me, a litmus test is always that if I pick up the guitar and I play the same chord progression and the same melody comes back to me in exactly the same form, then I know that this is here to stay. Um, and that has happened obviously with all the songs that are now released. I feel like That is my own internal sort of litmus test. So I start out very simple. I start out with the chord progression always. The chord progression gives me not just um, sort of the obviously the substance of the melody, but also the mood of the melody. Like what should the mood be of the entire song, and the mood will then determine the lyrics and everything that follows. So I find interesting chord progressions, and usually when I write the chord progressions down, I'm already humming something. So I'll jot it down somewhere. I'll save it. But again, I can take bits and pieces of different melodies and make the final edit. But the main thing for me is that it needs to come back to me as it was. If a new melody comes back or a completely different thing, then maybe the old one didn't work,
It's
and
gone.
that's it. It's
It'll be
gone. It didn't
ethos.
stand the
Yeah.
test of time.
Yeah. Have you guys ever had a 5 minute song where you're just like jamming and song's ready in 5 minutes?
We had that. You know
Yeah,
that
I feel like our first ever song was probably like that.
really? Which
Yeah,
one? Table for
Table
two.
for Two, yeah. That was very quick. I remember like from start to end, it just happened. And it was also one of those songs where Sarthak showed me the chord progression and we just started playing to it. And we both knew when we were done with one section. We're like, yeah, let's.
Oh
this,
yeah, now I remember it.
we were jamming and we were like,
Yeah,
I think, and both of us instinctively had moved to the next part. We're like, yeah, this is done. Let's move to the next thing. Oh, we can bring this back. Oh, this can be where a guitar solo can come in,
Yeah.
and we can end like this. So I feel like that was what that song was uh, a good sense. I mean, it gave us a good sense of what this project can be, where we weren't overthinking parts. We're just like relying on our instinct and our shared memory of what growing up was like and what those bands were like and the kind of music they made back then. And I think that we're like now very clear that this is what we want to rely on. This is not just inspiration, but this is our understanding of music because we've grown up on it. So let's just you know put our money on this now. Let's see where this takes us.
How do you guys maintain authenticity in your art? Like, I know it's a loaded question, it's difficult, but the best art feels when you're performing it, it feels real, right? Like,
Yeah.
as opposed to covers.
Absolutely.
Of course.
So how do you maintain that? How do you connect with that?
The first, when you asked me to give that piece of advice to people, I feel like that is something I stand by a lot. The first piece of advice, which is just try and be a more complete person. And when you do that, I think what inevitably happens is that you develop your own voice. You literally cultivate and nurture it, right? Like the books you read, the places you travel, and the people you meet. And when you think about all these things, it's so important to know yourself. I think one of the things that unfortunately has been happening a lot around us for a lot of people is that even when I'm sometimes watching live music or watching films or anything, everybody is just trying to look the same because it's formulaic and it probably works, and it's therefore palatable. But I don't see that as our job. That's one part of it. So then what's going to help me do my job? What's going to help me do my job in my experience is to literally talk about my experience and to think about it, to reflect, to find an insight that is relatable, that most people have experienced in some sense. And the only way I can do that is by refining my thoughts, refining. I have an idea, I have a thought, I had an experience, whatever it was, right? Like love, heartbreak, friendship, family, whatever it may be. I can't just look at the surface level of that experience or that thought. I need to go within that. That is my job as an artist. I need to see the insight at the very center of that experience. What did it make me feel? How did it add to my life, etc.? Because that's what you're doing as an artist. You're adding something to someone's life. You're adding value, some kind of insight or experience or emotion or way of thinking to someone's life. So my mission really every day, like music, like I told you, comes second to me. The mission is to just be a more complete person, be well rounded. And that helps you be authentic, because if you're doing that, if you're looking within and understanding yourself, you can't be anyone else. Even if you tried, you wouldn't just be anyone else. But if you're not looking within, if you're literally eh, blind to what your thoughts are and ignoring it day after day, then of course you're going to just, be a part of the herd. You're going to sound like someone else, whether you like it or not, because they sound interesting, and then the third day somebody else sounds interesting, and that's going to happen. So if you know who you are, then the choices you make, even artistically, creatively, anyhow, they come from a very, very solid source.
I also feel like audiences are a lot smarter than we think, and I feel like everyone can always tell when you've not been authentic. Similarly, they can tell when you are authentic, and you may get like lesser numbers at the beginning, and that can put people off. But I still feel, and I think both of us do, that we'd rather bank on what we know of ourselves and who we are, and just see that through rather than changing to just get some short term fame and success, because that is exactly what it is. It's short term. You might blow up overnight, and then that's exactly how fast it'll go. But if you take your time to understand yourself and you stick to the identity, right, I feel like it's a slow climb, but you'll keep climbing. Like, we have to enjoy it too. Like, I mean, that's the first thing. We might be the creators of the music, but we are our own first audience as well. If we're not having fun, how do we expect anybody else to have fun? Like, there's so many times when we're on stage and I look at him, I'm like, is he enjoying it? What if I do this? Maybe he'll enjoy it more. So it's always a thing of uh, we have to enjoy our music first, because that's the contagious bit. Because that's when people see and they're like, even if they're distracted by something else, it will grab their attention. It will want them to be like, oh, what is this? Who are these guys? And that's it. That's when you can build a loyal fan base.
So I remember going to Shash and telling him, man, I think we just need to. I love writing with you, and I know that we have such a great time. Let's just aim as high as we can.
Yeah, you just
So,
have
like,
to scale up. That's it.
That's all I told him. Like, we just have to. Let's do whatever we can, but let's set the bar very high. More than like just a single or an EP. Because, yeah, I mean, we can be every other artist and put out 10 singles every month and have a separate marketing campaign for that. But I was like, what do we really want to say? Like, is there something of substance, something that matters, something that affects our lives and the lives of people around us that we see? Is there some truth in what we want to say, or is it just going to be like a gimmicky 10-month long thing? So I said, let's just scale up. And we started working on demos that we had, and this entire album actually was produced at home. And then we went into the studio for the mix and master and some overdubs and just refining a few things, but like 80% of it was done at home over a period of like 10 months. So when we started writing, I think what listeners will also notice is that a lot of these songs are very different. There's like one song is like psychedelic rock, a couple of electronic songs, very synth heavy, like 90s, 80s dance music, and then straight up punk. There's also ballad, as you said. But one of the things that really tied it, I mean, the only thing that tied it all together was the theme. So as we were writing it, the theme of like this idea of hurt people, which is that if you're hurt, if you're carrying hurt from the past within you and you don't address it, you're going to perpetuate it. And if you relinquish responsibility, completely abdicate responsibility for your life, you're going to perpetuate it. So that central theme was tying all of these songs together lyrically, even though sonically they were very, very different. But we kept writing song after song, and that's something that came up in our heads that, oh my God, are we just again writing 3 separate EPs, But I said, no, let's just keep pushing through, because I feel like there is something that ties it all together. And I think by the end of that 10-month process, we were done with the album. We had these songs, and we went to Stitch Audio with our producer friend, and who's the mix engineer and mastering engineer, Ayan. We went to him and we said, look, we have all of this ready, but it has to be an album. We just see it as an album. There's no other way we're looking at it. And then that fine-tuning process of finding some kind of average for these songs to be sonically tied together happened, and that was the more technical process. But thematically, it was all again from one center, even as you said, sonically away, that punk ethos.
Like growing up, did you guys like listen to full albums?
Absolutely,
Oh, yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. We had all
We
the from
didn't
like
grow
cassettes.
up with singles. Like, we didn't. I don't think I fully understood what a single was till quite a while later, because I'm like, where's the rest of it? So I think that for us, it means so much to have a central theme, a message, something to say, as opposed to just yapping away. Like, sure, you can put out songs and you can be like, oh, I made this, like when I saw a bird flying over, I was like, whoa, cool bird. I'm like, okay, cool. That's interesting in its own capacity. But when you look at an album, suddenly you are put to the test as a writer, because then you realize that I can't have one stray thought and just run with it. It has to be fully formed in my head and has to make sense to me first. Otherwise, there's nothing that can tie this up, you know, because it's almost like telling someone a really long story. So you know that you have to keep it interesting. You know that it has to have a progression to it. You know, it can't just be scattered, it can't just be random thoughts that felt cool in the moment. You know, it has to, like Sarthak said, stand the test of time. It has to feel authentic, it has to be cohesive. And if you can achieve those things, you'll find that even the songs individually will find an audience as opposed to just the album. So the fear that everyone has that, oh, you know, why an album, no one listen to an album, they don't do that now. I said that they may not, but when they hear one song, they'll want to hear more. And when they see that it's all coming together as one story, that's when you can change that thinking, that you don't have to constantly limit yourself because you feel like you may not find an audience for it. You will find an audience because there's like 8 billion of us. There'll be someone who'll want to hear an whole album. So even if it's for those few people, at least we know that this is something we're proud of and this is a story we'd like to tell, and there is a cohesive message that makes sense from start to finish, because that's what we've grown up on. Like if you look at American Idiot and how it became a Broadway musical, like an album became a Broadway musical. That just goes to show that storytelling doesn't have to be limited to print and movies and things like that. It can be an album and it can come from an unexpected place, but a story is a story. You know, a message is a message. People will relate to it and they will see that it's authentic.
Um, what are your plans going forward? Like, are you guys going to start gigging?
Oh yeah.
What's on the cards?
So the thing that we're most passionate about is performing, and that's just something that is, we can't think of being musicians and not performing, you know, and definitely not online. Like we actually want to connect with our audiences live, and I feel like that's where all our music is also best experienced. So we have a couple of shows lined up in Bombay, and obviously we're trying to lock a few more shows. We're independent, we are not with any label or management, so a lot of the work falls on us, but we're pursuing it obviously to the hilt. And we're, the most important thing for us again is to just connect with our audiences, man. Like actually, not just the performance, but getting off stage and talking to people is something that I think is also a huge part of our job and something that we really love, you know. Because I think again, in a world where we're just watching people on screens perform, whether with reels or whatever, is sure it's one part of it, but I feel like the real experience of live music, and especially with a rock band, has to just, you know, really be live and to feel the full impact of the story that's being narrated. So we're definitely going to be performing live, and in the future, we're already planning the next album because we know now that this is our debut album, but we know obviously that this is how we want to tell stories in the future. Hi, I'm Sarthak.
Hi, I'm Shashwat. We're Saint Cyril, and you can watch us at the recording room on Canopy TV. You can follow us on Instagram and all your social media platforms at Saint Cyril Music. And please listen to our debut album, Hurt People, now on all streaming platforms.